Welcome to Side Alpha Leadership, a podcast where leaders can share their experiences and discuss what leadership means to them. I'm your host, David Polikoff. Hello and welcome to this month's Side Alpha Leadership. I'm your host, David Polikoff. On the line today, I have active duty Coast Guardman Jessica Shafer. Jessica, welcome to the show and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, David. Like you said, active duty Coast Guardsman. I've been in the Coast Guard for over 20 years now. I'm originally born and raised in northern Indiana. Graduated from Purdue University and then enlisted into the Coast Guard in 2002. After just under 12 years, I did decide and applied and was accepted officer candidate school. And I've been in the officer corps since 2013.
Cool. So talking a little bit about the Coast Guard, because, like you and I talked offline, there is kind of some, I don't want to say mystery, that's not the best word to use, but, people may have a decent understanding about the branches of the services, but the Coast Guard has always been kind of, I don't want to say outlier, because again, that's not a good word. But what exactly are the duties of the Coast Guard? And one of the things that you brought up when we were offline was that whenever we are at war, the Coast Guard works hand in hand, obviously, is right there, even overseas. So can you talk a little bit about that and kind of the duties of the Coast Guard during peacetime as well as during wartime?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. So it is a commonly unknown, or I guess commonly unknown is kind of also a misnomer. It's not very well known that the Coast Guard as a service has participated in every U.S. conflict from 1790 to today. We were driving the Higgins boats during D-Day and the Pacific Islands during World War II. That's kind of one of our more notable things that we did. We were also riverine units, amongst many other things, during the Vietnam War. Obviously, we had roles then in Operation like Iraqi Freedom. You keep moving on and up, and you get this history that involves us everywhere, but typically really unknown, again, because during those times, we do fall underneath the Department of the Navy. All other times, we were under the Department of Transportation, and then most recently, I believe 2005 is the right year when we transitioned under the Department of Homeland Security when it was created. I think it was signed into law in 2002, but I think we officially transitioned a few years later. You'd have to fact check me on that one. But one thing, we've always had some missions that we've done. We started off, go way back, 1790, right? So our first and our initial mission, we were signed in, it was 10 vessels were created to enforce trade and tariff laws. Credited mainly to Alexander Hamilton, kind of considered the founding father of the Coast Guard. That morphed over hundreds of years to the present U.S. Coast Guard that everybody knows, which was actually kind of given that name 1915, I believe. Pretty sure. So what's funny about that is my perception is that most people think that we started in 1915. I would say that's just when we got our new name. But prior to that, we were kind of doing a lot of the same missions. We've evolved and adapted, and especially after 9/11, when we stood up our ports, waterways, and coastal security mission in response to also the USS Cole attack and September 11th attacks, where we started doing a lot of port security. Prior to that, we still had 10, now 11 statutory missions that we do. Of those missions, again, your ports, waterways, coastal security, PWCS, drug interdiction, we do aids to navigation, search and rescue. Sorry, I'm counting these out of my hand. Marine safety, defense readiness. I feel like I'm taking a service exam. I think I'm on 6.
Keep on going.
Migrant interdiction, marine environmental. MEP is marine environmental protection. We do ice breaking, ice operations, of course, law enforcement, and I think marine safety, because marine safety and law enforcement can go hand in hand, but they're definitely two different things. And so that's the 11, I believe. You'll have to, again, kind of fact check me. So we're a pretty small service for doing all that. I think our claim to fame, but it might be an infamous claim, is that we are smaller than the New York Police Department. I believe they have over 50,000 people, and we have just around 42,000 active duty members. So we do all of that with a force size less than that of the New York Police Department.
The jobs that you guys are responsible to handle is enormous with such a small footprint. So I wanted to touch on a couple of things. You had talked about how you guys were driving the Higgin boats. And for the people listening, if you don't know what that is, Google it. You'll recognize right away that those were the boats that were bringing the soldiers to shore during D-Day, when the gates would come down and they would storm the beach. So huge role in D-Day. So I would challenge everybody to Google Higgins boats and that stuff. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, we talk about 9/11. Obviously, everybody knows the Twin Towers, as well as the Pentagon and the plane that went down in Shanksville. What did the Coast Guard do the moment that they recognized that we're under attack? Obviously, New York City is surrounded by water. What was the role of the Coast Guard? How fast did you guys get put into service and to actually, I'm assuming you would start to patrol all around New York to make sure that we weren't getting attacked from the water as well. Is that the case?
Yes, so I was not obviously present there. I wasn't even in the service at this time, but I have been very fortunate to work with some people that were stationed in New York City at that time, that did respond. Notably, one of the maritime enforcement chiefs that I worked with when I was stationed in Connecticut, he was from New York City. He was on active duty in New York City. He was on a Coast Guard boat. To us, boat is something under 65 feet. Cutter is something over 65 feet. So he was on a 25-foot Coast Guard boat. And when that happened, and of course it was affecting not only his hometown, but, the mission, he instantly was launched into evacuating people off of Manhattan. It is an island after all. And so from my understanding through their recreation, also I think there's a phenomenal book, and it's largely pictures, but it's called All Available Boats. And it's not a Coast Guard book. I actually bought it at the 9/11 memorial. Just resonated with me as well because the resiliency of the human spirit. He, like all the available boats, to quote it, responded to Manhattan and started evacuating people off the island. So that was one of them.
Yeah, that was a huge undertaking at that, because at that point everything got shut down and trying to get people out of the lower part of Manhattan so rescue workers could get in was a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. So going and spending a lot of time with him. I had the privilege of working with him and spending a lot of time, and we did a lot of ferry security boardings on the ferries in and out of Long Island and the southern coast of Connecticut to Long Island and back and forth. And, one of the reasons we were doing that was because of, the events that occurred on 9/11 and just hearing his side of the story and his ability. I think it was bittersweet. It's happening to you, but he was at least empowered and was in a position to be helpful. I think that was something that probably, I don't want to speak for him. I am speaking for him, so I'm going to try to stop after this. But it just seemed like that was if you have to be in a horrible situation, it is good to be able to do something about the situation instead of feel helpless.
And it's kind of, I think, with any part of the service, whether it's police, fire, military, we deal with horrible stuff, but having the knowledge and the skills to be able to do something about it, that's what resonates with people that serve. It's the reason why we serve to begin with. We see people on their worst day, having the worst day of their life, and it's our job, our calling to try to ease suffering, and then try to make things right. Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it can be done pretty quick. One more thing about New York, I wanted to talk about when the Sullenberg, I'll say, landed his plane in the Hudson, the Miracle in the Hudson. How I'm assuming the Coast Guard was enacted. How quick did it take for them to get there? I know a lot of the ferries started heading that direction to try to ferry people away from the plane.
I am unsure about timing on that whatsoever. I, like you, watched that from a distance. I know when we were watching the news, we obviously saw, and for me, I can recognize the boats really well. I do remember seeing Coast Guard boats immediately on scene, but what that immediate, air quotes, immediate word is, I couldn't tell you. However, I do know that we were able to respond and assist with that, including, the safety zone after, and making sure that nobody else essentially ran into the plane in the water, because, then it's a hazard to navigation, and so we prevented the situation from worsening. But as far as how fast we were there, I couldn't tell you that, to be honest. But based on the photos and the fact that there were still people on board the wings, I would assume it was pretty quick.
Yeah, no doubt, and I would assume that during 9/11, when things were happening at the Pentagon, I would assume that the Coast Guard played a role coming up the Potomac as well to ensure that we were safe in that aspect, or that it was guarded on that aspect. Would I be right to assume that?
Absolutely. I mean, you had units nowhere near, so Coast Guard Station DC absolutely probably participated in some sort of security measures that were stood up immediately following. Again, not being in the service, I came in the year after. I can tell you that everybody that was in the service used to tell me about how all of a sudden, I mean, in Cape Disappointment, Washington, which was my first unit out of boot camp in 2002, you're talking about a small coastal town, fishing town, and they stood up a security detail and changed their security posture at their station. So it's an interesting thing that it radically transformed, in my opinion. I wasn't in before it, but from my understanding, it radically transformed the way our service did a lot of law enforcement. Actually, one of the gentlemen that I worked for, if I was an E3 when I reported, he would be an E5 or an E6. So he was considered a supervisor. He actually released a book 2 years ago, and I recently read it. I thought he did a very good job of articulating the transition of that pre-law enforcement focused Coast Guard, at least from our search and rescue station perspective, to the post. Now we're doing a lot more law enforcement, and how that altered our relationship with the towns that we live in, because we aren't like bases. We are not shielded. We are very much so ingrained, and we live within the communities we serve in. We do not, we don't have exchanges, or we don't have those things unless you're fortunate enough to be stationed near one. So we grocery shop. Part of our job is to be an ambassador for the Coast Guard to the local community. And that is great. Can be challenging when things don't go well. But it's been great. And I've been able to, develop professional and, personal relationships with several mayors of these towns and be a part of actual community events, which has been really cool. It's been a bonus of being in my particular field in the Coast Guard. And so, the gentleman that wrote the book was then BM1, now retired Warrant Officer Chris D'Amelio, and it's called Life and Death at Cape Disappointment. So I just wanted to give him credit for that, but it was a pretty phenomenal account of his time in the service there.
Yeah, I can only imagine the amount of change and how quick, once 9/11 happened, the roles of the Coast Guard and their responsibilities. And you mentioned something, about living in the community, and there's a lot to be said about that. Obviously, active duty military, we have these large bases, they're guarded. You can't, get on as a civilian, and then the people live on the base, so there's not a lot of interaction with the soldiers and the town that those bases are in. But being in the Coast Guard, and when you're done with your shift or your day, you go home and you live in the community. And like you said, you shop in the same stores, and your relationships that you make with your neighbors who have zero to do with the military, it's pretty unique. And it's the same thing with the fire department. We work our 24-hour shift or our day work shift, and then we go home in the community. And where I live, there's one other firefighter that lives in my neighborhood, and everybody else is just average citizen, and I think it poses a unique opportunity to educate what we do. That every time you see the fire engine going down the road, it doesn't mean that there's a house on fire. There's our job is much broader than that. And it's the same with the Coast Guard. Is when a boat or a cutter goes out, you're not going out to shoot boats out of the water and things like that. The mission is very big, and over the years, the mission has changed. So I want to transition a little bit about you personally. What made you decide to get into the Coast Guard? Obviously, 9/11 had already happened. So you said you joined in '02. So what was the trigger that made you decide to serve?
So I was an accidental graduate. I road crew. It was a club sport at Purdue University. I had gone to school to try to walk on to the soccer team there, and unfortunately had a knee surgery, and just frankly, I'll be quite frank, was probably not good enough to. But I definitely was out of competitive soccer for a year. And so I was walking across campus one day, and I came across they were doing a little display with a crew boat, and I was like, I'll give that a try. And so for 3 years, I cut my teeth in what I would consider the hardest sport I have ever done. And I feel like I've done a lot, especially for what was available to me. Played softball as a little kid, and basketball, volleyball, all these things. And I had succeeded and failed in multiple of them. And so I said, sure. And here I was for 3 years, a team of well over 100 people who volunteered their time to go wake up at 5:30 in the morning and work at the hardest I've ever worked on any sport, give up our spring breaks. And so I kind of was in that competitive group, and I made some serious mistakes. And, and when I would make those, for example, I slept in and missed a bus to a race once, and my current, to this day, best friend called me out on it in front of a group of people. And there's no harsher life lesson than knowing you messed up and then having somebody you respect, dress you down in front of your whole team about your mistakes. So I decided at least then that I didn't want to be that kind of failure to anybody. I never wanted to let somebody down like that again. And then two, right before I graduated, I actually had a hernia. I developed a hernia. I had injured my back during spring training, and apparently my stomach muscles overcompensated for that. And so on my front right stomach, I had developed a hernia, and I really needed to get it operated on. Well, my doctor said that I could wait till after I graduated. They're like, well, if you can row with this, basically I could just tape it, basically just like wrap my stomach. And I was able to row because our nationals was the week of graduation. So we actually missed our graduation every year to attend nationals. So you have these people getting these 4-year degrees in engineering. And I was a liberal arts student, not saying anything less about that, but you had people getting major degrees, sometimes doctorates, skipping their own graduation ceremony to go to a volunteer sport national championship. So really unique group of people. And essentially I wasn't going to have health insurance after I graduated. And that was that harsh reality. Number one, I had done a bunch of extra internships. I had lived in London and done an internship this summer before. I went to Mexico and did an archaeology project down there. And I gained all these extra credits, and I just really didn't have a solid plan for what I was going to do when I was going to graduate, because I just really was being a very stereotypical college kid where I was very much so enjoying my time. I loved going to class, but I wasn't a stellar student. I really loved my sport. I loved, I worked as well. I just kind of wasn't planning for the future when I graduated. And now here I am faced with the fact that I did not know what I was going to do for a job. I had to get a surgery that I could have gotten later because I wouldn't have any health insurance afterwards. Things like that, right? Big kid choices, we call them, like big girl choices, right? Or big girl decisions. So it really was a stark awakening that I needed to be able to take care of myself. Thankfully, I had an older sister who was way too kind and let me live with her. She actually got me a job. I was a nanny for the two most beautiful girls on the planet, besides my nieces, of course. And I was there. I just felt kind of like a sponge, a leech, and I actually had to kind of beg to get into the Coast Guard because I'd had so many surgeries. I'd had knee surgery. I'd had hernia surgery. I'd had all these surgeries, which, by the way, back that up. I ended up having the surgery and getting back in my boat before nationals and rowing in my boat as planned. I worked my way back up from actually the freshman boat all the way back up to the varsity boat and was able to compete in that nationals. And that was phenomenal, right? So again, graduate, no plan. I started looking at the services because quite frankly, and I think this still 1000% holds water. I know everybody says we're in an economic recession now. I think we had one in 2008, obviously. But I don't remember there being a lot of jobs available, especially in the area I was in 2002. So the things that the military in general offered was 100% self-sufficiency. You have health insurance, you have basic allowance for housing, so you have somebody to pay for your housing, up to 80% of your housing. You have a paycheck that isn't dependent on hours worked. It is every other week. Obviously, the government shutdown threatened that, which was an interesting thing that we went through. But that was 18 years into my career, was the first time I didn't think I was actually ever going to get my standard paycheck. And I had, I think I already said about life insurance, and I had full medical. I don't know what other service or what other job you could get instantly. Conversely, somebody could say that it creates dependency, which it does. It does. But the fact that I could have 1000% independence and not rely on anybody else was very important to me. Very important. And I really wanted that, and I sought that out. So looking at all the services, and I also wanted a physical job. I knew I wasn't going to be content sitting in an office anywhere or not doing something that required some sort of physical effort. So I looked at all the services, and at the time, to my understanding, the Coast Guard, and I think this is also really true, had zero gender specific. There was not. You could do every job. There was no gender specific jobs. You could do every job in the service if you were a girl. And also at that time, I'd lived all over the country or all over the world, but I really hadn't seen the west of the Mississippi except for to row in San Diego. So I was like, you know what? I'll do this. I'll be able to see all the country, which I very successfully have. Even my dog, my first dog, had seen 38 of the 50 states. And so I've got to accomplish all the goals I wanted and really get to that state of full independence almost instantaneously once I got into the service. The reason I enlisted before officer candidate school is I had to prove that I was physically capable of being a part of the service, and that was all on me. I had to really, really, really be on top of my recruiter and prove that I was worthy of being in the service. And then the officer candidate school, even if I was selected, wouldn't start for another year for me. And so I found out that I could enlist, and then if selected, I could go from my enlistment status. And to me, that was the best option. A, it also provided me that independence that I was looking for, and B, I would be on the same footing as everybody else. I wouldn't have been really enlisted for a long time, but I would know what I was getting into. I would at least have the lingo, the experience, some experience, and be on equal footing with my peers.
I think I want to talk about a couple of things. Going back to your crew days in school, and when you slept through your alarm, you missed the bus. I think you from way your friend kind of called you out on the carpet. I mean, yeah, that's what friends do. But I think that kind of, it sounds to me like that solidified your team first mentality. It's all about the team, the group, before it's about the individual. We strive for that in the fire service. I know they strive for that in the services and in the military. Of team is first. It's not the individual. I think that, I guess from what I hear from just that situation of you missing the bus to compete, kind of solidified in your mind that you're part of something that's bigger. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, and of course, I say miss the bus. Let's read between the lines there. I irresponsibly went out the night before and slept through my alarm. So, it's not that I like just accidentally because I was studying too hard missed the bus. No, I was out with friends. I was having a great time the night before. Never really had that moment. And fortunately, I think that some people have it in a much more severe way. But having, I got in my car that next morning and I drove down to the race, and it's humiliating. Like, there is no way to get around that. To like even talking about it to this day, which is kind of funny because it seemed very superficial, but it was humiliating. And again, she's still my best friend to this day. It gets brought up every once in a while. I don't think I'll ever live it down. I think if I were to die first at my funeral, she would bring up the time that I, went out and had too good of a time before a race and missed the bus. But it's that feeling where you're not the one people can rely on, and you're not the one people trust, and it's not anything it's all of it was within my control. All of that mistake, I 100% owned all of that. And so I think those are pretty rare. Sometimes when things or these moments happen to people, there's some shared ownership. That was all on me. That was all based on my decisions, the way I was living my life, and the choices I made. And so to just see that look of disappointment on somebody's face when you don't pull through for them, I am not saying that I have never done that since, because I have definitely had lapses where, again, my personal choices had bad results. I don't think any of us are that imperfect. But I think on a day to day, I strive to not be that person. And that actually gets taken pretty funny ways sometimes. It gets taken to be a micromanager. It gets taken to be a know-it-all, bitch sometimes. It gets taken, that determination to not be that person isn't always good either, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does, and I think that whether you knew it or not, that incident set you on a path of dependability. That's something that in leadership we strive to understand, that you're part of something bigger. It doesn't all hinge on you, regardless of what your status is in the organization. But it's a team mentality. So that sets you on a path of, I don't want to be the person that can't be counted on. And there's two ways that can go. When that happened, it could have been like, get off my back, I made a mistake, blah blah blah, and then you don't move on from that. And because you owned it, you moved forward from that. That stuck in your mind. Now, granted, nobody's perfect. I mean, even to this day, you look back and think like, oh my gosh, if I could go back in time, I would totally not do that. But I think it's these little incidents as we move forward in life shape who we are, and then it is, how do you learn from that, and then how do you move forward? Obviously, it was a good sound lesson for you at a young age. I feel comfortable saying that, that you recognized, this is on me 100%. Even though I got called out on it, I own it, and I'm going to strive to never do that again. But like I said, we're all human, so I think that that's an important life lesson for the younger people out there, especially in the generation that's coming in now, is that it's okay to make mistakes. I tell my kids all the time, it's okay to make mistakes. We learn from it, we'll move forward. Everything's a teachable moment. What I do tell my kids is, if you keep making the same mistake, then I'm going to have to figure out, is there something wrong with you? I tell my kids, I'll give them a factory reset and we'll go from there. But it's the same thing with recruits in the fire service. It's okay to make mistakes. We want to learn from the mistakes. We'll learn from it now, so when we move forward, we don't make those mistakes. So I think that's important.
I think what you're trying to say is reflect on them. So I've made that same mistake, granted, far less frequently as I've gotten older. I think the lessons that you take differ from each one. Sometimes it's a matter of, yep, you got to forgive yourself. Learning to forgive yourself. Okay, mastered that. And then somehow you fall back off the wagon again, and you're like, how did I fall off the wagon again? This was crazy. And then you have to really think about why you did that. Like, what caused you to go down? Like, what was it? Because it's not the same. And, being a, idiotic college student is a little bit different than a grown adult who has, no reason to ever kind of fall off the wagon again. But I say that, and it's like, of course you have reasons. And it's about, I agree with what you said. You have to actually reflect, but one of the things that I do too much sometimes, I can get in that downward spiral. Everybody's like, what's something negative that you do? And man, I can really, like I said, if I think back to those moments where I felt that horrible, if I allow myself to sit in that, it can really crush me. And so there has to be a balance with that. You have to take it. You have to allow yourself to be punished. And even with my husband's children and, with my nieces, I am not a parent myself. I don't claim to be. I basically view from the sidelines parents, and I do not envy how you teach your kids to feel that bad, but then recover from it. I'm not sure how my mom taught me. I'm not sure where you learn that, but I definitely think that resiliency is a skill you need as you're moving up in any job or position. And I've been fortunate enough to have friends both in the military and more friends outside the military, and it really does resonate the same.
Well, I can tell you right now, there's no rule book or there's no direction manual for bringing up kids. It's all you're flying by the seat of your pants, and what you hope is that through time, they start to make the connections. I like to tell people that you have to view your actions as you get older from the 50,000 foot level, as if I go do this, and these are the things that I have to do tomorrow, looking down, how's that going to affect? Once you can start to master that, to be able to start to put the sequence together of, I'm doing this now, how's that going to affect this tomorrow, or the things that I have to do, or what do I have, if I'm going to do this, what do I do in order to make sure that I'm good to do whatever it is that I have to do. Trying to figure out how to instill that in your kids is difficult. I remember one thing in particular of trying to teach my son how to catch a baseball with a glove. And it's instinct. You can just put the glove on and you can catch the ball when somebody throws it to you. But to try to teach that to somebody, it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
How do you put the glove on? You got to hold your glove like this. When the ball comes, you got to catch it. But if you don't tell them, hey, if it's coming for your face, you have to move the ball. I hit my son in the ear several times throwing the ball to him, and it's like, all right, how do I get it from my head to them, for them to learn? And eventually they pick it up. You want to try to make sure that they understand life's lessons as well. When something happens, make it a teachable moment. Hey, you did this. This is what ended up happening. This was the outcome. So in the future, remember that. Put that in the back of your mind. So when that situation poses itself again, you have the right direction to go. And it's not easy. One of the things that you talked about, how when you got out of college, you were living with your older sister. One of the things that that struck me was what you said, is that you had that desire to make it on your own, to be self-sufficient. I can tell you right now, that scares the hell out of my wife and I joke with my kids all the time. I was like, understand this, when you get your job, you're not living in my basement. And then I tell my daughter, I said, Alex might live in your basement, but he ain't living in mine. And so that's kind of the joke in the house. But you want your kids to be able to fly the nest. Now, most moms will say, like, I want to be close to my kids as much as possible. I want to be near them whenever they move and this and that. And as a dad, you're like, yeah, when I retire, I'm looking, let's go move someplace that's warm. We're going to be wherever my kids are. And I'm like, well, what if one's on the East Coast and one's on the West Coast? The answer is, well, we'll just live in the middle of the country. I'm like, that's not an answer, but that's a mom answer. But I think our desire is to be self-sufficient, to be able to get out of college. What do I do now? My daughter is going to graduate this year from high school, and she has no idea what she wants to do. I know what she's good at, but to be able for her to kind of make that path of what to do, to me, is scary. I don't know if it's scary to her, but it scares the crap out of me. And I put these unrealistic expectations on my kids because I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life when I was 13 years old, and I can't put that expectation on my kids. It's not fair. So it's very difficult for me to not do that. Most
Well,
people
and I
think,
wouldn't say that. I think that that's, I think somebody's told you that that's unrealistic, and that is unrealistic. It is real because you did it. So it has been real. It may not apply to them, but it is not an unrealistic expectation, in my opinion. It just may not be their reality, but it definitely is real because that's what you did.
right.
I didn't
is
know
real.
I didn't know what I was going to do at all until, circumstances prompted me to make better decisions. That doesn't mean that that's same with your daughter. I had no clue what I was going to do, and I was graduating college. So I knew what I wanted to do. I got some great advice. I remember going to my professor's office, and I was like, wow, I'd really love to be a professor someday. And he's no longer with us, but I remember being in his office. It was a classic anthropology office, just a narrow room with books falling off shelves all the way back to a desk that was just a disaster. And he said, go out and live life. He's like, that's the one thing he had done. And that's the one thing he told me to do. He's like, if you can apply academics and real life, then you'll be a better professor than even I would be. And I was like, that'd be great. So maybe that'll still happen. But it's these series of advice, and just because your advice is real to you, hopefully she's getting advice from somebody else, and hopefully she's getting advice from somebody else. But I do think the only thing that's unrealistic is any of us ever knowing what we want to be when we grow up.
Right. And that's the funny thing is, my wife, she's a nurse now, but she didn't become a nurse. She started 18 years ago. She walked across the stage with her nursing degree, pregnant with our daughter. But before that, she had a dual degree, one in English and one in biology, and then came out of school. And it's like, what is she gonna do? I didn't know her then. And she had a series of jobs. She ended up being in pharmaceutical sales, making great money. We were together, but hated it. She hated the sales, and she'd always wanted to be a nurse. So it's like, well, then go do that. Now's the time to do it. So she figured out what she wanted to be when she grew up, but she was in her 30s. Me, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I did that. I did it for 34 years, retired, and I'm still doing it. When I say unrealistic expectations, I can't take my expectations and put it on my kids. I can't say, you need to know what you're going to do right now, because most people don't. And most people that I talk to that go to college, that end up in the fire service, they got a 4-year degree. It's like, well, what did you major in? I majored in theater. We're in the fire service now. We've got a girl that we hired in recruit class that's getting ready to start now. She has a master's degree in like physics and stuff like that. And I'm looking at her application. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is she doing in the fire service? But it's a calling. It is what it is. And so, like I said.
And I think that's interesting. I have an anthropology degree, and that was, what are you going to do with that? I'm telling you, I use it every single time we move. I have a cultural anthropology degree, and I've lived all over this country in all different facets of, West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, and I think it's really served me well to be able to be more of an observer and an appreciator of each individual place, and take like almost an ethnographic approach to where I was living, helped me settle into those lifestyles. So, I always laugh when everybody says to my husband, well, what are you doing with a philosophy degree? And he does. Actually, I need him right now for this exact moment. Essentially, he can take something I'm saying and he can actually verbalize a thought. I can ramble just like I did for a couple seconds trying to figure out how I wanted to say this. But he has learned how to take all of that ambiguous nonsense that's flowing out of my mouth and put it in an articulable, knowledgeable form. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. That's something that he does really well that he didn't do well until he retired from the service after 20 years and went and got a philosophy degree afterwards. So that's kind of like, I don't think there's any such thing as a useless degree. I think it's just how you realized your degree. What I would say.
Yeah, I agree. And looking at an anthropology degree, based on what you do moving around, it's basically the study of people. And
Hmm.
what better way to put that together where you start to understand why people do the things that they do? Well, you have that knowledge. Same thing with a philosophy degree. If your husband is able to take in a bunch of information, put it all together, and then produce a view that's accurate, that's definitely worth its weight, because I think people talk way too much as is about taking a long time to get to a point. But
Hmm.
there's people I know that have law degrees that don't practice law. They're not lawyers, but it's their way that they
Absolutely.
think. They're very analytical in how they think, and they're good at arguing. It's the same thing, or I don't want to say arguing, but debating. It's the same thing of being on the
Hmm.
debate team, learning how to structure an argument to be able to take in the information from one side and then put your side out there to counteract that, as opposed to just yelling and screaming like we see going on in politics right now. I think that it's a lost art. So you're absolutely right. I tell people, whatever you want to do, I got told my daughter, whatever you want to do with your life, start off with a 4-year degree. And I said, you don't necessarily have to do that, but having that college allows you to think and put things together and move forward. It also shows employers that you did something, you stuck with something for 4 years. You were strict about the regiment about it. You turned things in on time, and you graduated that institution, regardless of what your degree's in. And in the fire service, we got people that have degrees in all kinds of things. But as they progress through the ranks, we're not looking at do you have a degree. We're looking at do you have the college credits in order to move through each rank. So, like I said, we've got people that have degrees in psychology, and people that have degrees in physics and engineering and things like that. It will serve them well as they move forward. Now, I want to talk about as you moved into the Coast Guard. And one of the things that I think is pretty cool is that even though you came out with a 4-year degree, you went in not as an officer. So I tell people, I think that allows you to see the whole service before you start moving through the ranks. Whereas if you were to come in at a rank, you might not know what the privates and the corporals and all that do, or what they had to go through to get there. So I think it kind of grounds you a little bit to know where people are coming from. I know in the fire service where you start off as a recruit and you move through the fire as a firefighter, and then as a driver on the apparatus as a technician or a master firefighter, and then you move through to lieutenant. I think you have a good idea of what every person does in the rank that's below you, as because you came up through those ranks. So did you find that as an accurate statement of being able to start off at the bottom and work your way through?
So I did absolutely. It has certainly served me well as an officer to have been enlisted. The downside is I'm usually about 10 to 12 years older than my peer group. So that is the downside to that. Also, I haven't had that shared experience of going through the service academy. That's a pretty good mafia, for lack of better terms, but they have a good union. Like they know each other. They have these shared hardships, whereas my shared hardships are with my enlisted brethren from coming up through those ranks. So it is, there's pluses and minuses to both approaches. To your point on the college degree, I would actually, we are going through this right now with my husband's youngest son. I don't necessarily agree. I wouldn't actually advocate. I don't advocate for anybody to go to college if that's not what they want to do. Especially if they are thinking about a service career, because the one beautiful thing about being in the service is you do get a lot of education money and a lot of education opportunity without any of the debt for most people. So I don't, so you can kind of get to the same ends where, my husband, and, he did not do a college before he came in, did it afterwards. He was not only a better student because he was actually invested in it at the time, and his maturity was in a different place, but he demonstrated the same thing that you're talking about with that commitment in a 20-year career, 10-year career, 4-year career. So I think that there's ways to demonstrate that without necessarily getting a college degree. And at least in the service, you can get that for free while you're in the service, which is really, really super impressive. And it's, again, one of those perks. I got my master's degree since I've been in, and actually working on a second one. And while I had to pay a little bit out of pocket for my master's, it was essentially completely free. It was maybe $300 or $400 for an entire master's degree, whereas, you know, an undergraduate degree in a traditional 4-year school was, I want to say it's average $250 now. I'm not really sure if that's correct, but I'm pretty sure that is around. It's just expensive. So out of all that, like, I say all that to say that it served me well having been at school beforehand. It did create a little bit of a interesting divide at the beginning, just because it wasn't that common to come in with a 4-year degree when I was initially in service, but now it is extremely common. A lot of the enlisted members I had at my units, especially over the last, not just current, but my 6 years in command, almost all of them had some version of a 4-year degree. And they were, you know, using the service as part of kind of, they got to the same point through the degree and then using it as that steady income to help buy down their debt, because there is, you know, again, benefits. Civil Service Members Relief Act keeps, you know, interest rates down as long as you make your payments on time, all those sorts of benefits that you can get from being in the service. So I did find, though, to your original question, that it really did, it has served me well in my career field, having been prior enlisted, because I would say I definitely see people treat me different, because I just think I feel as if I can communicate more easily across ranks. That's probably one of the things that I feel I can do. There's no it's demystified for me. I don't shy away from senior enlisted leaders like Master Chiefs. Those are the highest enlisted rank you can have, or warrant officers. Those are the highest commissioned subject matter experts. It's a specialty commission that you get when you get to a certain point in your career. And I think that that's been nice. But again, that's actually now turned into my peer group age-wise. And so that's where it kind of, the imbalance comes as I get, you know, a little bit more older. Unfortunately, we haven't seen, at least in my service, you haven't seen a Mustang reach the commandant. I do not believe that we have had a commandant that was a Mustang, as far as did a significant amount of service and then transferred over. And logistically, we're just too old. We just get old. Again, when I went to OCS, I was 12 years older than one of my roommates. So I'm in my early 30s, and she was just coming out of college at 21. That's a pretty good life experience to overcome, and very different perspectives to work with. So it's been great, and there have been some challenges with it. Overwhelmingly better, but definitely some challenges. And then as I look to my future and what does my ceiling look like, I'm not sure where it goes, again, just because we've moved around for a long time, and that's part of being in the service. That's kind of one of the negatives, is you do have to move around a lot. It's a positive and a negative, as is everything. But we'll see where it goes. But again, I think that unfortunately the downside would be the fact that I am just kind of like a decade older than where I actually probably should be for my current rank.
I look at that as a double-edged sword. Having that experience and that age going into OCS, and your peers are younger than you, you've gained life experience that they just don't have. I think being older gives you a way to look at problems, look at issues, look at life, and the things that are happening in the here and now would affect you differently, and how you would react to it, versus somebody who has not had those life experiences, where it would be like this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and you could just turn around and say, give it 10 more years, you'll find more things that are worse.
And I mean, I definitely had those conversations. You know, physically, I was the person stretching in my rack at 4:55. Usually, you know, they came in around 5 in the morning, and you had to go outside and get yelled at for not doing something right, and go through a little mini PT session first thing in the morning, you know, and I would be in my rack stretching before that happened because I was like, oh, this is going to be, I can get through it. And I'm a pretty physically active person, but, you know, they would just wake up from a dead sleep and run out there and do that. And I'm worried about pulling a hammy, you know, so it's just it's an interesting difference between just physically too. And again, like I have been able to out PT people far younger than me, even at my current age, but you know, it's differences like that. And then, like you said, they're going through all this for the first time. And I think there were 4 of us in my OCS class, Officer Candidate School class, we called it OCS. 4 of us that had been in the service over 10 years. And there were definitely some days where we'd stand across the hall and we'd hear them start yelling, you know, the instructors start yelling. And I'd be like, okay, what face do you want to go out with? Do you want to go out with concerned face? What are we playing today? Are we playing stressed out and concerned? Are we upset? You know, like what do you want to do today? And then, you know, we'd laugh and we'd run out there and we would play the game. So there was some, you know, we kind of had some fun with that. And then there were other days where you just feel like you're old and you don't want to be treated like you are not an established adult human being. And that was tough to take. So there were those humiliating, humbling days as well. All building resiliency, all doing what they want to do, build you down and bring you back up. Just some people I think needed it a little bit more, hadn't had it done before, whereas a lot of us were like, oh man, we've been through this like 6 times.
Right.
We've been here.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your deployments and some of your duties. Now, you know, talking with yours and my friend Shelly, she had said that you know, talk about her being a surfman because that's like a huge thing. And I'm like, all right, I have no idea what it is, but I want you to kind of get into that. What is it, and how hard was it, and what's the prestige that's around it?
So a surfman is a designation in the Coast Guard. We drive boats, again, boats being vessels less than 65 feet, particularly 47-foot motor light boats. I believe the ones they have in Chatham are 42. I can't remember. Don't quote. Well, you're going to quote me on that. But and then we used to have a 52-foot motor light boat that's been recently decommissioned. And there were only 4 of those ever in service that were also considered surf-capable platforms. There's only 3 in the Coast Guard. There's 21 places that we serve around the country. There used to be quite a few more. There's actually some really great books about surfmen that operated on the Ohio River and things like that. But basically, we are authorized to go into the largest seas that the Coast Guard will allow in order to conduct search and rescue. The boats have to be surf capable, which means that they can roll over and rewrite themselves. And you have to just be willing to really be willing to exercise some severe patience with the training process because there is no formal school for it. You cannot go to a school to become a surfman. And I think that's one of the most challenging things about it. However, that patience that it takes and those years you sit waiting for Mother Nature to present you that perfect training opportunity and hopefully line up with the fact that your assets, your boats are just in operational condition at the time when you have these training opportunities, that lining up can take some time. And that's the only way to get the training you need. There is no way we had a simulator. I would say there's just no way to simulate being totally vulnerable in front of a 20-foot breaking wave. So we can operate in up to 20-foot breaking seas, up to 30-foot seas, and then 50 knots of wind. Of course, we can go over all that. Unfortunately, I had to several times, but you have to get waivers and you have to have a reason. Back to that risk versus gain. It has to be you have to have a good enough reason to go into limitations that you aren't supposed to be into. So it's a challenging process. You start off as a basic coxswain, which is anybody that can drive a boat on any given day. So just your normal, everyday boat driver. Then you move. It used to just be coxswain to surfman. They implemented about a little over 20 years ago, I think 25 years ago. They had an intermediate position called heavy weather surfman or heavy weather coxswain. Geez. And that was kind of, you could go out in a sea state between up to 8-foot breaking seas in between that of a surfman and a basic coxswain. A basic coxswain is not authorized to go in any breaking seas. And when I say breaking seas, it's what you picture in your brain, like a wave that's actually breaking. Most people think of the 4-foot seas for 4-foot breaks they have on the beach off of, Florida on vacation. I'm talking 10, 12, 20-foot seas in open ocean, not next to a beach, that you see off the Pacific coast and in a few select spots off of the Atlantic coast as well. So for me, when I did enlist and I was selected to go to the National Marine Lifeboat School, which is the only unit in North America that trains in those conditions on the Columbia River Bar out in Cape Disappointment, Washington. It's co-located with Station Cape Disappointment. I got there, and the reason that I was actually selected there, because I was one of those people that wanted to go to Alaska as well, like your friend that we talked about offline. I went there because it was a commissioned officer in charge. It was a warrant officer, commissioned officer, and they could sign my officer candidate package. So an officer has to sign your officer candidate package. So that's how I ended up there. I got there during the winter, which is the notoriously heavy surf months, and I saw my first storm. And I not only saw the storm, but I saw some boats operating in it. They were training. Of course, I was at a training unit. And I remember thinking, can I do this? So I can do this. And they're like, yeah. And it was like, I had to ask it 3 or 4 times. I was convincing myself. I was like, can I do this as an officer? And they're like, no. So to me, that was an easy decision. The mission is to save lives. That to me is not a hard mission to get behind. You're telling me that I would have the ability when no one else could to be able to save a life at sea when there is no other option. I would be the last option. And with that, that's pretty weighty too, right? Because if you fail, there is no other option. But to me, that was a very, very easy. It didn't even take probably took point nothing of a second to be like, okay, I can get behind that. That's a good enough reason for me. And then there was the training process, and I was at a training unit. But the training unit wasn't for me. I was just a maintenance / duty driver of a vehicle to go pick up students from the airport 2 hours away. I was a boat maintenance person. And so I kind of had to prove my worth a little bit and fight my way into receiving training, because it is very challenging on people's bodies. I saw people get broken. I saw ribs get broken. I saw knees get blown out. I saw people walking around with back issues. I saw a lot of damage, but again, I had grown up an athlete. I had recovered from injury, so none of that really intimidated me about it. As we've gone on in the years, we've changed the way we do things, and I think we've gotten a lot better. I think injuries have subsided substantially. I've had my own pretty severe injuries, and I think we have just grown better as an organization where that's not as common. I also think it's also socially better. Like, we take care of ourselves better. I look at my average crew, which is 22 to 26 years old. I've got people that are very conscious about their food. They're working out. They're doing yoga. I think that just socially, people are coming into the service more physically aware and trying to take care of themselves a little bit better. So I think that's helped reduce the amount of injuries and things that have occurred over the past few years. But when I started, it was a really daunting thing. And it was just a very challenging. Basically, I wasn't in a spot where I was going to receive the training without earning the right to receive that training, number one. And then number two, you had to exercise some severe patience, because it's just not something that was available all the time. And so when it was, you had to make yourself available for it. And that actually still holds true today.
I want to touch on a couple of things. One of the things that I know, I know now because talking with Shelley, as a surfman, if people want to get a better picture, I know you can. There's videos of these boats going out off of you said it was Cape Disappointment. Off the Pacific Northwest, to get an idea of what these boats go through. These boats are capable of doing a total submersion and then righting themselves. And then to see, what Jessica's talking about, look at what these boats go through. It's friggin' ridiculous. Going over top of these breakers. If you know anything about the Pacific Northwest, it's nothing but rocks and waves. And seeing what these boats go through, and knowing that the person that is operating this vessel is capable of doing what they're doing. When you see these boats totally do a 90-degree flip and then right themselves back up and continue to go, to me is pretty impressive. I would look at that as the special ops of Coast Guard. And like you said, you're the last resort. If you can't do it, then it can't be done. I think there's a video out there of a boat that was, actually it was a ship that was stranded in ice, and I guess it motor wasn't working, and I know the Coast Guard had gone out to get these people off the deck, and you could just see the waves and the ice crashing over top of the boat, knocking these workers into the water, and then you guys going in and getting them. It's ridiculous. It's nothing that I would do, but I would challenge anybody listening
Well,
to that
and
to go take a
likely if
look
there
at
was
that.
yeah, and likely if there was ice present, that probably wasn't a place where we had a surf unit. But I operated most of my career out of Southern California, or not Southern California, Northern California, so outside the Pacific Northwest. I cut my teeth up there, and definitely learned all my basics of boat driving up there, and then went down to from Washington, where I also stood some duty in Oregon. I was lucky enough to have some mentors that allowed me to transition between units and go work at 3 different units while I was just assigned to one. And that was so I could get both, normal. I was at a training location, and I assume it'd be like a fire department. If you get assigned to a training location, you're not getting that operational real world experience. And that is very vital to the success of any coastie. And so I would get to go to 2 operational units, and just work on a normal flat calm day, and just kind of cut my teeth on some basic search and rescue. And I say basic, but nothing ever seems basic. The
Right.
easiest case can turn into the worst nightmare very quickly. And then I went to Golden Gate, which at the time was the busiest Coast Guard unit in the service. We were running well over 450 cases a year, and it was just a shot in the face of. I can imagine it be going from a very, a fire station in which you get 1 or 2 maybe calls a year, to go into a fire station where you get hundreds of calls a year, and those calls are so different that you never get the same thing twice. Not that you really do ever, because people are involved, but you just never get the same scenario twice. And I had to learn real quick how to take in mass amounts of information and then figure out how to create a solution to it. I think the one thing that was super helpful with that is that the boat driving part by then was very automatic. It was like driving a car. It's still really highly technical, and you still have to think about it, but I didn't have to actually physically think about moving the sticks or the throttles or the helm. That was happening. I still had to read, it's just like driving a car, right? You're thinking about, oh, I need to merge lanes, but you don't really think about the fact that you use your turn signal. Those kinds of things were automated by the time I got into this, the throes of Station Golden Gate, where it was just absolutely insane, and then ended up being there for 7 years, at that high operational tempo for 7 years, which was pretty bonkers as well.
So transitioning from, in your analogy of going from a slow fire station to a busy fire station, yeah, you're we've got state companies that run thousands of calls a year. Obviously, they're not all fires. It's all different types of stuff.
Yeah.
And you talk about your routine calls, and we'll say something like, well, that's a bread and butter fire, but the fact of the matter is that the house is still on fire. It's the same thing. You're still out on the water, and it can still turn into something. So the things that you learned, how does that transition into as you move through the ranks and where you are now, and being able to taking those lessons that you learned where you had to think quick on your feet, How does that help you today, being able to make decisions and things like that, especially if you're making decisions on the fly with less than perfect information like we do in the fire service?
I would say that, again, rooting from my little, non-consequential college story, where you realize it's not about you. It isn't about you. It's about your service. It's about your boat crew. It's about the persons you're helping, but it is not about you. It's only about you if you make it about you. And, I've fallen victim to that a couple times, and that's when I've realized that I did something wrong. But at the end of the day, if whether I'm in a, command position where one of my crew members has just done something to get in trouble, or, there is that operator transitioning to support person, as you move in the ranks and you're not necessarily the frontline firefighter anymore, but you're the backside observate, being the one that's just like making sure everything is, I don't approach that from how is this going to end for me? It's how is it going to end for them? And my job becomes, I think what I've learned and transitioned up is, what did I hate when I was in their shoes? I hated somebody not listening to me and not giving me the resources I needed to do my job. So as a more senior person, it is now on me to make sure that they have the resources to do their job to the best of my ability. And then providing any, encouragement or big picture that might be lacking, because you can get very fixated in the moment. So you have to be that person that says, okay, I know that you're only seeing this thing because it's right in front of you. I'm telling you there's other things around you. So don't get super hyper fixated on what's happening to you directly. But I think the biggest lesson I learned, and again, offline, you talked about from bad bosses, that is I worked for somebody that always took everything to that personal level where, and I quote, and sorry, there's a language, just if anybody, I'm not going to say the word, but he would say, if somebody got in trouble, you'd be like, F me, F them. And I'm like, he didn't do that to you. That crew member didn't go out and get that DUI. He wasn't thinking about you. That crew member didn't, run aground because he was thinking about you. There was nothing you involved. But I worked for somebody that would just kind of take that approach, and they would just forget about what happened to the other person. So it's not about you. And even if you're the person in charge of the boat that runs aground, or the person in charge of the boat that doesn't do what you're doing right, it's about your crew and how you handle your crew. And so you have to be willing to have those self-reflective moments and choke them down. And ironically and kind of unfortunately, the progression of a service career kind of runs counter to that. As you have promotions, you have pay increases, and so it's like the promotion and pay, at least in the military side, kind of makes it about you. But I try not to do that every day. If that makes sense, like, am I explaining that right? Where it's like this battle between, yep, you always want to promote, you always want to do good, and you want to do good things. But that kind of almost runs contradictory to the "it's not about me" thing that I try to do on a day-to-day basis. So it is like a little internal struggle sometimes.
It makes perfect sense, because when you promote, you are promoting for yourself, but the bigger picture is that you're promoting because you feel, and I'm not trying to sound cliche, that you can make the service a better place based on what you've learned. And the way you do that is you move up through the ranks. As you move, in the fire service, you go from, driver to a lieutenant. Well, I want to make the fire service better, and in order for me to do that, I have to start achieving rank. So I get the rank, but I never forget where I came from, and I never forget about the crew that's with me. They come first. So even when they do something wrong, it's on me as the officer. I'm responsible for it, and I'll do the best that I can to protect them from the people that are above me. But we are a crew, we are a team. I'm the officer, so therefore, whatever happened to an individual is my responsibility, and I'll make sure that I can protect them the best that I can, offer them the best advice that I can. And it shouldn't be one of those, I can't believe you did that, you're making me look bad. I've told officers chief officers when I was a captain, one of my guys would get into an accident with the fire engine, whether it be just a property damage accident, they dent the fire engine, they back into something. And I had bosses that would I can't believe you're doing this. It's making me look bad. And I'd pull those guys aside and say, let me tell you something. That guy didn't wake up this morning and said, what can I do to fuck the battalion chief today and make his day miserable? I know.
Yeah.
I'll back the fire engine into something, do damage, so I get in trouble, and I can't drive until I get cleared from this accident, which also means that I can't work overtime to make a little extra money. But I'm going to do that just so I can make my boss look bad. So you got to take
Yeah.
the me out of it. It's things happen. And as an officer, I'm responsible. I take full responsibility, and I'm going to protect my guys, but I can't make it about me. And I think that's
and
important.
yeah, I agree totally. I would choose a different word than protect. I would choose accountable. I would choose that it's my responsibility to hold people accountable at the right level. I think protect sometimes gets this negative connotation that you're going to, protect somebody from punishment. And I'm not saying that's what you meant. I'm just, when you said that, and I'm like, I just think it's accountability, right? But making sure that accountability, at least to the best of my control, is somehow standard. And I have not been perfect in this. I have gone back and forth. When I think about decisions I've made, I rarely sit back and reflect on the ones where I rarely ever reflect and say, that was a great decision. That's not what runs through my head. I will reflect and review decisions that I've made previously and think, okay, was there a better way I could have made that decision? Was that I'm not looking at everything and man, that was really good. I did a really good job on that one. That is a thought that just rarely ever comes into my mind, especially in a reflective process. It's almost always that, all right, so I chose this to hold somebody accountable, or I made sure, that my crews, when they, messed up, not necessarily were protected, but properly accounted for. And I guess that means the same, because I don't think everybody, every mistake is not equal, and every, flagrant error is not equal. But the way in which you hold people accountable for that, I think is really, to me, where the soup's made.
And as a leader in your organization, you take the decisions that you made that weren't stellar, and we reflect on that because we want to do better. But you can take those experiences and pass that on to people that are coming up through the ranks. Learn from what I did. I did this, and this is what I should have done. One of the things that is makes me feel good inside is when I have people call me and say, hey, I'm going to sit for this particular promotional exam. I'd like to pick your brain. To me, that means that they respect that I came through the ranks. So I obviously did something right in their eyes. And that is the best reward that I could ever get, as my peers feeling that I'm a good leader. And that's better than any award or certificate or whatever that I can get in my career, is just knowing that my peers respect me as a leader and want to strive to have some of the traits that I have. I can't think of any better reward than that.
And I agree. That is I agree. It does make you feel good, especially when especially some people I've had to hold accountable will later, years later, that they really appreciated, the way I handled situations. And, even though we were on the opposite ends of the spectrum on those things, I've gotten a lot of those phone calls, and those are the ones that mean a lot to me. Ones that have meant a lot to me have been the ones that I remember we had a case, and this was when I was a basic coxswain, so that meant the flat calm seas coxswain, for lack of better explanation. And there was a boat in distress, and I was out with another boat crew, and the master chief, high enlisted rank, said, "Hey, Shafer, you want to take this one?" And I was like, "Well, Master Chief, it's supposed to get snotty by the time you get back, because we're out for hours. We're out for hours. It was going to be a 10, 12-hour situation." And I was like, "Master Chief, it's supposed to be terrible in 3 or 4 hours." I'm like, I'm not certified to drive in the predicted weather. And so I didn't go out, and that was saying no to a case that I could have gotten back, and they could have been like, oh, she's not ballsy enough. I hope I can say that word on here. She's
Sure.
not brave enough. She's not this. She's not, you know what I mean? Like, brave was the better word, but she's just not tough enough to handle it. Or, I started like thinking, oh my gosh, they probably just think I'm a wimp. Right. But really my thought was, I'm not certified to be in those conditions by myself. And sure enough, they went out there and just got smoked for hours. And it was 10 or 12 hours. The seas did increase to well over 15 feet, well over 10 feet, which is what I was authorized for. And it was a really challenging, difficult case coming home. And I remember being very concerned that, I wimped out. And this was really early in my career. And the coolest thing ever is my engineer that day, she got off the boat and she looked at me and said, I would have gone out with you. She's like, you could have done that. I would have been your engineer. And just interesting, right? Like that 20 some years later, the fact that she would have gone on the boat with me, somehow made it just took all the negative thoughts I had away. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted to be trusted by my crew. Not a senior person telling me I can do something, but the crew that was going to be basically at the whim of my decisions, because they're not driving so that I am. They're the ones that are going to pay severely. I've been that crew member that's paid severely for a boat driver's mistakes. They were going to be on my boat, and I was going to be responsible for their welfare. And the fact that she said that when we got back was pretty awesome. And so then it didn't matter what they said. Of course it mattered, because that meant they could train or not train me or continue to. But they got back and they took that road. And so I had those good leaders. I mentioned working for a bad one. I had those good leaders that I learned good things from. And one of the good things I learned is the value of people who say no, people who understand their limitations, whether or not they agree with them. People that are willing to make those hard choices. And I got rewarded for that. And that was pretty awesome. And that's what that's one of the things I took. And I'm like, I want to be that person as well.
I think, I know having the trust of your peers and the admiration of your peers, like I said earlier, means more than anything else that you can get. So, believe it or not, we're at the hour and 15-minute mark, and you were so concerned that you wouldn't have anything to talk about. We're going to go ahead and wrap up, but I want to thank you for being on the show. I like getting the perspective of something outside of the fire service, where it allows people to kind of make the connections of leadership and the things that you've learned along the way, and how you put those to use, and getting it from a perspective from the military side as just opposed to the fire service side, I think is valuable, because there's things to learn through everything. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and I appreciate what you were able to share with me and the people that listen to the show. And I'll give you the any final words that you want to throw out there, and we'll wrap it up.
No, I know we talk a lot about leadership, and I know your podcast discusses a lot of that. If I had to leave anything with anybody, I'm a big proponent of followership. I've learned far more and had far more opportunities in my career to be a follower, not a leader. And being able to be a good follower, I think, has been one of the biggest things that's helped me in the times where I've been fortunate and sometimes unfortunate enough to be a leader. And so I guess if I had to have any contribution in anything, it would be, kind of helping focus people on how to learn followership and how to kind of incorporate that into our development. Sorry, this is my husband's computer ringing. As we move forward into these, into the next, is how to be a good follower. And I think that is a critical thing that I hope will improve upon as a service and as a world.
Absolutely. You cannot be a good leader if you were never a good follower, and vice versa. You can't be you cannot ever be a leader if you were never a follower. So again,
Right, right.
Jessica, I thank you for coming on the show, and
Thanks.
look forward to the feedback that I get from it, and I'll share that with you. So with
Oh
that,
yeah, you can keep it if you want. I'm always like, this is like, I have no idea what I hope that I do, but I hope that it was I hope it was good. I enjoyed the conversation as well. So thank you.
absolutely, you take care and be safe. Okay,
You too, sir.
bye.